somebody who disagrees with you will eventually be there. So they're starting to realize, hey, wait a minute, this could come back and bite us. So they don't like him for that.
They don't like him for that. There's people who are starting to look at him with the whole voter fraud thing, saying, yeah, we don't want the voter ID and all that stuff, but his refusal to even investigate the new Black Panthers kind of defeats their entire stance to do away with the voter IDs, saying that they're racist and stuff. So they want to get rid of him for that. And then you have Benghazi and Fast and Furious.
Right.
And
Benghazi and Fast and Furious are not going over as well as conservatives would like with the liberals. But maybe Fast and Furious might be looking at a resurrection because of all of the illegal immigrants that have been crossing the border. And it's arguably causing a little bit of a spillover, more than usual, of the drug wars that are going on just south of the border. So maybe that will come back into prevalence.
We're seeing a lot of that here in South Texas too. A lot of the people down in the Rio Grande Valley are trying to sit there and say, "Look, this isn't a war zone. It's not how it's portrayed in the news," and they're correct. There's a lot of hyperbole out there over it. It's not that bad. The problem is the majority of the crime that does happen is being done by illegals, and it's being done by the organized crime coming from the south side of the border. So it's kind of importing itself. It's not from the actual locals. But down in Dilley, Texas, they're building this new ICE facility to house any families that have minor children. And then you have that going on, and now you have the Pentagon going along with this new order saying we're going to start enlisting illegal aliens, but they have to have a medical background. So there's that.
Yeah, I'm not expecting that there will be many, if any at all.
There won't be that many. But that, of course, all lends in with Fast and Furious and the stuff going on with ISIS and all the other Islamic terrorist organizations. And then you have Eric Holder stepping down and Bader Ginsberg talking about maybe retiring while she has a chance to be replaced by a progressive. But I, for one, just like you, don't see Holder getting confirmed. He's got too much out there. No conservative is going to confirm him. And there are Democrats, including Blue Dogs, who are just looking at him and saying, no, too controversial, he's not as even keeled as we would like to see a Supreme Court justice. I mean, having some bias on one side or the other is fine, but they had a hard enough time with Sotomayor. Imagine the hard time they were going to have with Holder. Every single little detail, every time he protested and threw something at a police officer, every single incident like that is going to be brought into light. And it's going to cast a bad shadow on their entire party. Do they really want that bad press?
Right. And he's not making it any better because he doubled down on the war on law enforcement, so to speak, because he came out just recently with that statement that he doesn't really trust U.S. law enforcement. Not that I can blame him. No. The latest thing that's going to come out as far as, the truthers and false flag people, and this annoys me to no end, and it makes me very angry, and I may get angry enough to pick up the phone and call the FBI media office today. Not that I expect them to give me an answer. But crime statistics came out for 2012, and they had Connecticut, and there was no mention of any murders in Newtown. Yeah.
Wow.
And this is because, as it was pointed out to me, that, you have uniform means of going and reporting crimes, and it relies on local law enforcement. Well, local law enforcement, for whatever reason, decided that it was not a good idea to report that crime, so they didn't. So the numbers aren't there. And I'm sitting here thinking, I think that maybe the FBI needs to reassess their means of collecting data on crime. I understand that they mean well and they want to have local law enforcement being the sole source. But when you end up having local law enforcement neglect to report one of the largest crimes in the entire state, in the history of the state, yeah, and the FBI was involved in the investigation, so it's not like they had no clue. And, well, let's be honest, it's called a newspaper. It's called the Internet. We know that this happened. There is no earthly reason for it to have been excluded simply because local law enforcement didn't report it. This is filed under the bean counters should have been yelling and saying, hey, wait a minute here. This wasn't reported. We can't put this out because all it's going to do is exacerbate the situation when it comes to all of these wackadoodles that we're calling it a false flag. It's just going to lend credence to their claims, which is going to inflame the situation and it's going to cause these families more undue pain. And that was probably the reason why it wasn't reported, by the way, so that there wouldn't be a statistic out there to remind the families. Well, it's going to have the opposite effect. And it's already started. I've seen it in my Facebook stream, and I'm just ready to bang my head against the wall. Because, unfortunately, these people think that the FBI collects this data from multiple sources, and they simply don't. It is only from the local law enforcement. So I'd love to know why the Newtown police decided it was not a good idea, and why Connecticut decided it was not a good idea to report it and add it to the numbers. I know it's sad and everything, and maybe they don't want to be remembering it on every single thing, but given the circumstances, it was a colossal mistake, and it's going to cause massive amounts of conspiracy theory nonsense going out there on the web. And this is the kind of thing that makes people question whether or not we can trust organizations like the FBI, the Department of Justice, and everything else. I get furious with the Black Panther thing because I had my phone ringing off the hook when that was happening, because I had worked in campaigns in the Philly region. In fact, I had been tasked with doing protective services, which basically in the past, which basically was having roving private security people, Pinkerton types, go from pole to pole and make sure that the workers were safe. And I had people calling me and saying, who's working at this year? And they were just totally spread out because there were calls everywhere. And if I didn't know better, I would say there was a concerted effort on the part of the Black Panthers to not only do what they did, but also go and make a whole bunch of false reports to these campaign managers saying, oh, there's problems at pole A, pole B, pole C, so that everybody would be, all of the protection type people would be going to the wrong poles and not going where the Black Panthers actually were. So I don't think they're that smart. I think it was just, Philly being Philly, because it usually is chaotic, and the election in question, historic situation, the first time a black man had been up for the presidency. But it's still ridiculous. There is no reason why it shouldn't have been investigated. On the contrary, it absolutely should have been. And it was a race issue, and it didn't fit the whole situation for the agenda for the administration or for Eric Holder, because it's impossible for a black person to be racist against white people in their world. Of course, that's not reality.
Yeah, I just love Eric Holder's ability to investigate what he wanted to investigate instead of investigating what needed to be investigated. Like, he was told to investigate the whole VA thing, and what did he do? He turned it back over to the VA and said, just let your internal IG self-investigate. The Fast and Furious thing. We're just going to let the DEA self-investigate until Congress took hold of that and started looking into it. And then you have that, that article that just came out from Katie Pavlik. I can speak this morning. My coffee's been too good, like I said. Where she reported that the FOIA requests, the judge is finally saying, hey, you can't delay this anymore. And it just happens that happened about the same time as Holder announced that he was going to resign.
Right. Yeah. Timing is everything. But of course, the judges are basically fed up with this nonsense, and it's going straight across the board whenever it comes to Democrats in general. What was it? August 8th. Supposedly, there was nobody knowing this. Going into New Jersey, which could have turned into a federal investigation, might still. The woman who was going to end up with jail time over crossing the New Jersey border accidentally, with the gun. She legally possessed the weapon. Here's the best part. I was reading the entire memorandum that finally came out of the acting attorney general there, and he went and he said that basically in these situations they need to, use the pretrial program that they put Rice in and didn't put her in, even though they suggested that she should be. I found out why they were suggesting that she should be, because, just about every other case like hers in the entire state of New Jersey is handled that way. Yeah.
Yep.
So, there needs to be an investigation into, and I'm not sure how deep the judge was in this, because there has been really bad reporting as far as this is concerned. Because initially everybody was blaming the judge, and then I found out that it actually was the prosecutor that started the ball rolling on all of this. So the judge might have been just, go along to get along type of thing. Because this is filed under, a prosecutor stands in front of the judge and goes through multiple cases doing motions. It's a motion session. So once you're there for how long? Let's be honest, is the judge really paying all that much attention? This is something where the judge could have sat there and said, okay, I'm not arguing with you, because, they take the word of the prosecutor and they don't, dig deeply into these things, because they have a pile of 100 different motions that they have to get through from the prosecutor's office. It's a formality. So
he looks at his watch and says, I have a gallery opening at 7. Can we hurry this along?
Or it is a morning session and he has an afternoon session with an actual jury trial or something. So,
exactly.
Because a lot of the time these are morning session things. You go in, you do this in the morning, you go back in the afternoon, and you have actual trials going on. So you don't want to be, holding up a trial to go and get through the 100 or so motions that are formalities and won't be dealt with in court in a trial until months later. So you just basically want to get through the formalities, get the paperwork done, and get the heck out of there. Go take your lunch and come back and do the rest of your session for the day. So I think that's probably what happened, and everybody's screaming about the judge. Meanwhile, it's the prosecutor. The prosecutor needs to be removed. Whether or not it's going to happen is another story, because you're still getting crickets out of Chris Christie. And by the way, anybody who still has him even remotely close to a reasonable candidate for the presidency needs to be smacked. Just say.
Yeah, him, and I hate to say it, Romney also. I'm not a big Romney fan. I held my nose on Romney during the last one. People are talking he's going to run in 2016. No. Just please no.
Yeah. He's too good. That's all there is to it. And I don't mean a competency thing. I mean as in a good person. He can be relatively cutthroat. We don't need somebody who can be relatively cutthroat. We need a total cutthroat bastard. So
exactly.
We need someone of the moral fiber of, I hate to say this, but Newt Gingrich. Somebody who has the cojones to go into the hospital room of his wife right after she has cancer surgery, say, oh, by the way, I'm getting a divorce because I'm trading up to get a younger wife.
That's the story, but that's not the entire ground truth. I've
no, but yeah, I know. But he has not come out against it over the years, because he liked having the reputation for being a downright bastard. Because in a lot of ways, that is something that people look for. when it comes to a political candidate, particularly for the presidency. You don't want a nice guy.
I like Newt, but unfortunately I do not like Newt as president. I like him as vice president, because the vice president's job is the same job that he had as Speaker of the House. Well, constitutionally anyway. Good luck finding Biden on the Senate floor. But that is what Newt would primarily be doing day to day, unless the president wasn't available. Then he'd have to step in. But that's where I like Newt. I'm kind of looking at Perry. I wasn't too warm on Perry during the last cycle, but after living here in Texas for a couple of years, I'm starting to warm up to him a little bit. And this time he won't be campaigning on painkillers. So,
right. Yeah, basically, Perry is a decent option. They're trying very hard to destroy him, which means that they're nervous about him, which is always a good thing.
Exactly. We've got the latest one going on down here where they're trying to investigate him for good old boy use of the Texas Enterprise Fund, which is a fund that they use to give subsidies and grants and loans to various businesses to entice them to move to Texas, or if they're started up and they're looking like they're going to do really well and they want to expand. You know, the state gives them these subsidies in order for them to generate the capital, generate jobs, get the growth in there, which then, because of the way our tax system is here in the state, that ends up being a lot more revenue within a year. It doesn't even take that long for the subsidies to pay off. Well, they're starting to target Perry because they're saying that about $250,000 of it, I think it's $1 million, I may have to relook that, but about $250,000 is being used, or has been given to people that didn't even ask for the subsidies. You just awarded them because it is an executive branch thing here in Texas. So yeah, they're scared. They're looking at every excuse they can to go after them, especially since these subsidies have been proven to work. It's one use of Keynesian economics that actually makes sense, which is really scary that I would say that, because I hate Keynesian economics.
Well, there are arguments to be had there whenever you have companies that didn't ask for it. But the argument is that they have to, in order to win the argument against him, they're not only going to have to prove that he did that, giving it to people that didn't ask for it, but they're also going to have to prove that they are Solyndra. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And if he gave money to companies that failed to failed to go and apply for it out of ignorance, out of whatever, pride, what have you, and the company in question actually expanded quicker than they had if they hadn't taken the money, if there is more revenue coming into Texas because of the investment. In other words, if the company did not have that money, they wouldn't have made as many jobs. They wouldn't have had as many taxpayers added to the rolls in Texas. They increased the tax level for individuals because they have higher wages. Any of those things. He is right to do it. That's all there is to it, because there are a lot of business people that shy away from taking government money, even applying for it in situations like that, because they're afraid that they will be seen as attempting to make public officials beholden to them.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
They're afraid of the strings, real or imagined, that might be attached.
Exactly. They don't want the government digging into their business, and they don't want the public to think that they're digging into government. They don't want, it's a two-way street. I mean, they really don't want to, anybody who isn't involved in government contracts does not want, there are a lot of business people who want absolutely no involvement with the government other than paying their not so fair share to the tax rolls. So I can understand it. I definitely can. And there's a very good, and it's a very good move on his part, because then the state gets what it wants, more workers. The company gets what it needs, and the company doesn't end